Okay, so building on the last video where we were using the rope to build an anchor, I'm just going to show you a few simple ways in a much shorter video of how we can use slings to build anchors. Okay, now whether that's using the sling to build an anchor in its own right, or we could use this sling and then it could become part of a rope anchor system that we've already looked at. Okay, but I'm going to show you two ways to use a sling on two anchor points. Okay, so it could be 2 bolts or 2 nuts or whatever. 2 anchor points equalised with a sling. Okay, just need a carabiner gravity loaded in each of my anchor points, and then what I'm going to do is find the sewn part of the sling and get that out of the way early doors. So I'm going to put that up in the top carabiner here, obviously do that one up, and leave this sewn termination here, and that way it won't get in the way of my knots later on. Then I'm going to do, make sure there's no twists in my sling, clip it into the other carabiner, give that a check, and then what I need to do is find the direction that this anchor needs to be pulled. So that is the direction that if my second falls off, they're going to pull the anchor in, or the direction that I'm going to pull it in if I'm going to abseil off this anchor. So which direction am I going to be pulling it in for most of the time? So you find that, maybe it's over here, maybe it's here, you find that, and then you grab a handful of this, put an overhand or a figure of 8 in here, make sure it's nice and neat, and then that is the anchor point. That's your sort of master point which you're going to clip into. Okay, this is also where you detach your rope, carabiners, that sort of thing. Just to be aware, there's more than one loop here. You need to clip both of them with one carabiner, or if you've got more than one carabiner, you can use both of these, but you must use both of them or put them together and use them individually. You must never clip in just one of them and leave the other one slack like that, because it's then got the ability to pull back through and undo. Okay, so moving on to the next one then. If you have, perhaps your anchors are a bit further apart and you're going to run out of room in your sling, and you want this anchor point to be nice and low, what you can do is exactly the same situation. So you start at the top here with your sewn termination out of the way, you come down, and this time all I'm going to do is just hook this over my thumb, mimic where this carabiner is going to be ish, it doesn't need to be exact, and again find the direction I want it to be pulled in, and then I'm going to take that, tie it around the back like that, just one overhand and around my thumb. This is going to be adjustable later, so we don't need to worry about getting that right. Into the carabiner and done up. Now, what I can now do is clip my carabiner through this loop and this loop, okay, to build an equalised anchor system, and all I need to do is just fiddle with this to make sure this central knot is facing in the right direction. Okay, so as I said, my direction of pull is going to be downwards, so I'm just going to make sure this is nice and central and equalised, and then the carabiner is going to go through this loop and through this loop, and I've got now an equalised anchor system there. Okay, but it's a little bit lower down than the last one. I had less sling to play with, so I've used this system here. Again, really important to know that whoever comes up and clips into it, or if you're using multiple different carabiners in this, every carabiner must go through both loops of this. Okay, otherwise you'll only be weighting one anchor point if you clip into one. Okay, moving on from the 2 sling anchors that I've just shown you, I'm going to show you now a self-adjusting sling anchor that's rarely used. I've personally not used it much at all in work, but it does promote a good bit of understanding and a bit of knowledge for you guys. Okay, so just to show you what not to do, if I have my sewn end in here, okay, clipped in, screwed up as per, okay, and the other end through this carabiner, the incorrect way of making a self-adjusting sling anchor would be to take one strand of this and one strand of this side, and then put it in an X like so, and clip through both. Okay, that way we've got our adjusting anchor point. It should still be loading each anchor pretty equally. Okay, so if the load goes over here, it's loading both equally. That load moves to this direction and pulls in this way, it's loading both equally. That's good, it's loading both anchors equally, but the problem with this is if one anchor fails, it shock loads the other one. So let's fail this anchor here. Let's say this nut pulls out or whatever. It's not going to fail completely and the climber shouldn't fall to the ground, but all of that drop is going to happen at once, and you're going to end up with a shock load onto this one, which could force that to fail. So to keep the self-adjusting anchor, but make it less likely to shock load the second anchor point, what we're going to do is quickly remind ourselves where the midpoint is, and then tie a small knot here, an overhand, and another small overhand here. And then clip that back to the top. I'm just going to make sure that the central point, when I pull downwards, is in between those two knots. So I'm going to move this knot up a little bit. Okay, now what I need to make sure I'm doing here, I'm not clipping one of these strands, and I'm not clipping over the top of both of them. What I'm going to do to make sure that I've got the most strength in the anchor point is to clip through one and then through the other to create this X shape through the carabiner. Okay, a little bit tricky to see on the video. Okay, you're making this X shape. Gravity load that carabiner, and now we've still got that adjustable, that self-adjusting anchor point where if I pull over in this direction, it's still putting equal weight on both anchors, 50-50, and I move it over here and it self-adjusts, unlike the other anchors we've looked at. But this time, if we fail an anchor point, it won't shock load this anchor point as badly. Okay, it just goes down and hits onto the knot here. Okay, so it only shock loads it a few inches rather than a couple of feet. Okay, so quite complicated, not used very often, but a good bit of understanding on how you can build self-adjusting anchor point. Okay, so just to show you how to build a sling anchor on more than two anchor points. Okay, it's very, very simple. It follows the same process. Again, starting with the sewn piece of the sling and getting that out the way in the first anchor up here. What I'm going to do is just clip one strand of this sling through each of the other two carabiners, making sure, screw them up as I go because I'm not going to come back to them. And then I just need to pull down on both of these slings here until I hit this third piece here. Oh, I need to make sure that slides out of the way there. So pull down on both of these until I end up with 3 equalised loops down here. So my 1, 2, 3 loops. Put them together as a 3, and I'm going to again pull that in the direction that I believe it's going to be loaded. So it could be over here, could be over here. At the moment it's adjustable, okay, but I need to tie it off to lock off each of these individual anchor points. Okay. So when we get to 3 anchor points rather than 2, it becomes more important to use an overhand rather than a figure of 8 because there's so many strands involved. A figure of 8 would make a very big knot. So I'm going to build an overhand here. Okay, so there's the loop going through the overhand. Pull that tight, bring the knot down, and as I pull that in the direction that I want it to be loaded, each of these should be equally weighted, which they are. Okay, so there's your 3-point anchor system on a sling. So this is a 240 sling. You'd be unlikely to be able to get 3 points together on a 120 unless they're very, very close together. Okay, so I said earlier you could use these sling anchors that I've just shown you as part of a roped anchor system, okay, rather than it being the anchor by itself. The way you'd usually use this is by using the sling to equalise 2 pieces of gear, whatever 2 they might be, and then using that as part of a wider anchor system. So I've got my 2 bolts here and my nut placement over here. I'm going to equalise these 2 with the sling and then build it into one anchor system with my rope, okay, as if I've just climbed to the top of a single pitch or multi-pitch trad climb. So again, there's the sewn joint of the sling going into the first anchor point. Nothing new, everything I've shown you before. Carabiner going into that. And then what I'm going to do is just, I could clove hitch myself into this one here. And then take the excess rope, clove hitch myself into my other carabiner, my other piece of gear over here, tighten that up. This central loop then becomes sort of obsolete, it's not useful, and then this over here I need to then clove hitch that back to me here, which is just like I did in some of the other rope anchor videos. Also, if I'm just using one clove hitch, a normal carabiner will do, into the rope loop as shown before. need to make sure that's equal. So if I'm loading these equally, this one's a bit looser than this, so I'm just going to tighten that one up a little bit. Okay, so we try and ignore this piece here because it's basically redundant. I've got two anchors, two pieces of gear equalised by this sling, clove hitched in, and then a loop of redundant anchor rope, and then another clove hitch onto a separate piece of gear back to me. So I've turned a 3-point anchor into a 2-point anchor by joining two of them together with that sling there. So that's just one way you can use the sling in your wider setup.